There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Genesis. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. But the sin of envy, it's always a hidden sin. And those who have that sin in their lives, they always hide it. They never reveal their true thoughts or their true motives, and they always justify their actions of hatred. And this was the Pharisees' sin against Jesus. The Bible says that they betrayed Jesus because of envy, and that led to his betrayal, and that led to his murder. Because what envy does, it just looks at others, and they have something they want. And instead of trying to become that kind of person so they can have those kind of things, it just says, that person doesn't deserve those things. They should be mine. I should have them. I should have their position. I should have their job. And I should have their beautiful things, their house and their car. And they don't deserve having a beautiful wife. I do, or husband. They don't deserve them. I do. But they never speak it out loud. They just hide it in their heart and they let it fester because they wouldn't dare speak it out loud because everyone knows it's wrong. And more importantly, they know how wrong it looks to be jealous. And they can't have people looking at them like that because they know it's evil. And so they just hate them secretly, and they wait till they can find an opportunity to destroy them. So here is where we need to examine our own motives, because we all have envy sometimes when others have things that we don't, but we need to make sure that we don't have a covetous eye. We need to catch ourselves, and we need to make sure that we're not envying people wrongly. And if we are, we need to turn away from it. We need to learn how to truly be happy for people when things are going well for them, and to be able to rejoice with those who rejoice. Okay, so now here we have Judah, the slave trader, and now he's living in the land and he's living away from his brothers. And really, who could blame him? He couldn't trust his brothers. They weren't nice people. They weren't safe to hang out around, or the people you'd want to raise your family around, because they had envy and they had hatred. And he was also aware of how violent they could be. So I believe it was pretty wise for Judah to get away from them. But here, Judah, he's also not really a shining example of God's covenant people. But none of these boys are, with the exception of Joseph. Joseph is the only one who resembles any of the integrity of the people of God. And so here, this seems like a very odd place in the narrative of the story of Joseph to be telling the story of Judah and Tamar. But it's a very important story because it's from Judah and through his line that will ultimately lead us to King David, and then it'll lead us on again to Jesus the Messiah. And Judah's not picked based on his own great character. He's picked because of God's great character. And this story, it does chronologically fall into the middle of Joseph's timeline of the time that he spent as a slave in Egypt. So now we have Judah here, and he's living away from his family, and he's dwelling among the Canaanites. And that's because he's comfortable with the Canaanites. Because if you read here, you see all his friends were Canaanites, and especially Hira the Adullamite, who seems to be his best friend, because he's mentioned twice by name in this chapter and also referred to once. and he's called there his good friend. And Adullam, if you look at the map of Israel, Adullam is very close to Chezib, where Judah lives. But Judah, he's not supposed to be living with the Canaanites because he's been called with those 11 other brothers who are to be tribes of Israel. And they're supposed to be a separated people because they're supposed to be a people chosen by God. But Judah, he's beginning to assimilate himself with the Canaanite people. It's because he likes them. And so he lives like them. And he's often visiting his good buddy, Hira, the Canaanite. Because what they do is they do the things that Canaanites like to do, which seems what Judah liked to do, and that's to go down and go down with his buddy Hira to go meet girls. And so Judah does. So he meets a girl, and she's the daughter of Shua, and she's a beautiful Canaanite woman, and so he marries her. But up until now, Abraham's covenant people, they've been keeping themselves away and separated from the Canaanite women. And you remember, Abraham and Isaac, they both protected their sons from marrying the local Canaanite girls because they know that they would change their hearts. They would turn their hearts from God. Because the Canaanites, their practices are not only sexually immoral, but they also worship many false gods. And their lifestyle is offensive to the real God. And it's offensive because their own practices, they actually hurt their own society. And most of us would agree to that because we would all agree that child abuse and prostitution and human sacrifices, they're just not acceptable behavior. And they have other practices that we can't even mention in a church. Because these people, they live the most vile pagan lives of all the peoples. That's why God was kicking them out of the land. And so Judah and his Canaanite wife, the daughter of Shua, they had 3 sons. And the first one being Er. And you might well think, well, Judah really did make an error. But Er's name means watchful. And then he had 2 more sons, Onan and Shelah. And they all grew up living like Canaanites. And why shouldn't they? They lived in Cana. They lived in a nice Canaanite neighborhood. Their mom's a Canaanite, and their dad lives like one. So for us here, it's just really important to see, you have to be very careful who you marry. If you're a Christian, you really need to marry a Christian. And you also really need to consider where you're going to live and who you surround yourself with and who you allow your family to surround themselves with. Because it's not just for your sake. Because you might do all right in any kind of environment that you go into because you are a Christian and you have a relationship with God. But your children, your kids, they might not survive it. And so one day, Judah took a wife for his oldest son, Er. Now, Judah, when he picked his own wife, he just picked someone that pleased his own eyes. He picked somebody that would fulfill all his desires, and they would have had the same values that he had, the same lifestyle that he liked to live. And so they were probably like party people. They were like partiers. And that's what we find when someone picks a wife for themselves, that they usually pick somebody like themselves, that shares their own real values, the values that are actually in their heart. So this often makes us wonder, when a Christian marries a non-Christian, well, what kind of Christian they really are. You know what they profess, but when their lifestyle doesn't match up with their words, it's usually the words that are wrong. But when you go and you pick a wife for your son, you're not going to go out there and pick for him a seductress. You're not going to go find an immoral woman with a questionable past. When you pick a wife for your son, you're going to probably find an attractive woman and a woman of a good moral character. You'd pick somebody smart, someone who will be loyal, from a good family, from a reputable family. You probably pick from somebody you know, because that's what we all want for our children. We want them to have a good spouse, and we want them to have great children. So when you're picking your own wife, you might, pick someone with some shortcomings for yourself because of your own desires and your own lusts. But you would never probably ever shortchange your son. And many commentators that you read, they'll tell you that Tamar is a Canaanite. But the Bible gives no ethnicity for Tamar. We don't know what she was. But the word Tamar in Hebrew is the word for date. And it's not like going out on a date, but it's the kind of date you eat. It's the fruit from the date palm tree. And her name, Tamar, can also be translated as palm tree. And if Judah here, if he has children of the marrying age, that means his brothers probably also have daughters that could be of the marrying age. And even then, you have other tribes living in the land of that area of the Canaanites. You have the Ishmaelites, you have the Midianites, you have the Edomites, and they're all descended from Abraham, and none of them are Canaanites. But I would suggest whatever Tamar was ethnically, she was a good woman, and she was smart, and she was pretty. She was everything you would ever want for your son. And then the Lord, he just calls it straight up, and he says, Er was wicked. And it says he killed him. So Er had no heir. He had no children. Because the Lord is not going to bring his Messiah through a wicked Canaanite man, even if his father is Judah and a son of Israel. And because Er had no child, Judah, he asked his other son, Onan, his second son, to marry Tamar, to raise up an heir for his oldest son, Er. And this is called a Levirate marriage. And it comes from the Latin word levir, which means brother-in-law. And we'll see these rules come out later in the Mosaic law, but we can see that even here, they practice these rites even before the law of Moses. And so Onan, he takes his brother's widowed wife, and he makes her his wife. And then we're told what kind of man Onan is, because he's the kind of man that doesn't want to raise up an heir to his brother. And so what Onan does is he never completes the act of intimacy with Tamar that would lead to a child. And many people, they've taught and used this passage to condemn the use of birth control or some types of sexual practices called onanism. But I'm not a judge of those kind of things because the Bible, it doesn't tell us about those types of things. And so I won't tell you. You're going to have to figure that out for yourself because I don't know. But I do think I know why God killed Onan, because God knew that Onan had an evil character. Because Onan here, he should have taken care of Tamar because she became his wife.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.